Right beneath the weathered wooden gate, 8 bodies were swaying. They were hanging upside down, their feet bound to a wooden beam, long hair cascading down like black curtains fluttering in the wind. They were 8 Apache girls, their bodies bruised, their breaths as thin as threads. Jackson leapt off his horse, his heart pounding so hard it ached. He cut each one down, catching them in arms that trembled with rage. No one deserved to be treated like this. No one. When the last girl had been laid down, Jackson looked around the desolate land he had spent his whole life trying to claim. And suddenly, he understood. Peace is never truly found in places bought too cheaply or too late. But still, he was here. And those 8 dying girls, they needed him now. Inside the old wooden cabin, the firelight from the stove flickered across the exhausted faces of the 8 Apache girls Jackson had just rescued. He laid out blankets one by one, placing them close together to keep warm. Their bodies were so cold that his hands went numb just touching them. Jackson heated water and used the herbs he had brought from the north to brew a remedy. He was no healer, but he had once saved his own life during long years of wandering. Now he was trying to do the same for someone else. One of them opened her eyes first, a girl with hair down to her waist, a thin face, and eyes sharp as flint. Aria. Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a breath of wind. "You are not with the Derringers." Jackson let out a dry laugh. "If I were one of them, you would not be breathing to ask me that." Aria looked around and saw her sisters covered with blankets, given water, and surrounded by Jackson's clumsy but sincere efforts. She touched the bandage on her wrist and gave a small nod, the Apache gesture of thanks. Another girl, Lyra, whose eyes were clear yet unyielding, was the first to sit up. "You saved us, but why?" Jackson paused, staring into the fire. "Because some things you just cannot walk past." He did not need to say more, their eyes understood everything. As their strength slowly returned, Aria took a deep breath and began to speak, each word like a thorn. "This ranch, it was never yours. It never belonged to any white man. This is our father's land, sacred land of our people." Jackson sat down, listening like a man who had just spent his life savings on a piece of land, only to find it had been paid for in someone else's blood. Arilla continued. "The Derringer clan came here 10 years ago. They wanted to seize the underground spring, the only thing that keeps this land alive through the dry season. Our father said no. They killed our family, our entire tribe, except for the 8 of us," Lyra added, her voice trembling slightly but held firm. "Our father split the map of the water source into 8 parts. Each of us carries one piece. The Derringers could not kill us, because they have not yet taken the full map." "Then why were you hanging upside down at my gate?" Jackson asked. Aria looked him straight in the eye, not flinching. "To draw someone out. To see who would dare come for us. And to capture him, and rip the truth from his mouth." Jackson felt a chill crawl through him, despite the fire burning beside him. He had walked straight into a trap, not by chance, but by stepping right into the line of fire in a blood feud generations deep. Nima, the youngest and weakest of the group, spoke with words so faint they broke between breaths. "If you let us go, you can still leave before they come back." Jackson stood and walked to the window, staring out at the thickening darkness. The strange signs around the ranch had left no doubt in his mind anymore. They knew someone had rescued the 8 girls, and they would return soon. Jackson replied softly, without turning his head, "I spent my whole life to buy this land, but if this land belongs to you, I am not going to leave you behind on it." Aria looked at her sisters, then at Jackson, in her eyes a faint glimmer of hope, flickering in the heart of a dead desert. The desert night wind carried a skin-cutting chill, slipping through every gap in the ranch's rotting wooden walls. Inside, the 8 Apache girls had fallen into an exhausted sleep, leaving Jackson alone by the window, a Winchester rifle resting across his knees. He could feel danger creeping in like a snake's shadow, slow but certain. Without warning, the sound of hooves echoed from afar, ringing out like a war drum across the sand. Jackson shot to his feet. The iron clatter grew louder, then stopped right at the gate. A voice rang out from the darkness, drawn out and lazy, but laced with lethal intent. "Jackson Hale, I know you're in there." The wind-rattled door trembled softly. The 8 girls jolted awake, eyes wide with fear. Arya placed a hand on Jackson's arm and gave a slight shake of her head, but he simply raised a finger to his lips, a silent call for quiet. Jackson stepped onto the front porch, moonlight casting his shadow against the figure of a man on horseback, Vandrick Boone. Boone was not the kind to kill in secret. He carried himself with confidence, arrogant even. His long hair was tied back low, a worn black leather coat hung off his shoulders, and a coiled rope hung from his saddle, one that had seen more than its share of hangings. Boone gave a cold smile. "Well, you made quite the move, Hale, touching what belongs to the Derringers without asking." Jackson leaned one hand against a porch post, his gaze calm. "Yours, huh?" "All I saw were 8 people hung up like animals. I cut them down. That's it." Boone laughed, a sound laced with steel. "You should have let them die. Would have been easier. On them. And on you." Jackson replied evenly. "I am not handing them over." The corner of Boone's mouth twitched a rare crack in his composure. "Those girls are holding pieces of our family's map. This land, that water, the entire valley, it all belongs to the Derringers. I came to take back what is ours." He leaned forward in the saddle, his voice dropping low. "Hand them over. Now." Jackson did not move. "You're not taking anything from here." Boone stared at him for a long moment. The silence, thick as embers in a furnace. Then he took a slow breath and straightened up. "Fine. Tonight, I came alone, as a courtesy." He tilted his head, voice sharpening like a blade. "Tomorrow, I come back with the gang. And then, there will be no more talking." He yanked the reins, spun the horse in one dramatic turn, and galloped into the darkness, leaving behind a howl of wind and the echo of a bloody promise. Jackson stood still until the hoofbeats faded into the night. When he turned back inside, the 8 girls looked at him not with fear, but with a mix of horror and gratitude. Arya stepped forward, her voice low and firm. "You are not one of us. You still have time to leave before sunrise." Jackson let out a breath and pulled the curtain shut. "I bought this land with every dollar I had saved in my life. But now I realize something." He looked at each of them in turn. "I did not buy land. I bought a war." And he knew that war would arrive with the first light of dawn. The desert night fell fast, like a black blanket thrown over the land. As the sun slipped behind the red rock ridges, Jackson felt it something was off. No coyotes howled, no crickets sang. Just a thick silence, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Arya stepped up beside him on the front porch, her voice low. "Boone never makes threats and walks away. When he says tomorrow, he means tonight." Jackson gave a slight nod. "I know." Around midnight, the wind suddenly shifted, carrying a faint scent of smoke. Jackson jumped to his feet and ran outside. Behind the old cattle barn, flames flickered in the dark. Boone had made his move. "Do not go out there." Lyra grabbed Jackson's arm. "They're trying to lure you in." Jackson paused for a second. As furious as he was, he knew she was right. If he ran out, he would be the first target. But watching the fire eat away at the barn, the very place he had planned to rebuild and raise a few horses to start a new life, Jackson felt his chest tighten. Boone was not just burning a barn. He was burning his dream. Zoe, the calmest of the 8 sisters, grabbed a blanket and raced around back with Nima. Jackson followed them, and the 3 worked to stomp out the remaining embers before the flames could reach the house. While they worked, a distant horse's scream tore through the night. The sound cut like a blade. Peha ran to the gate, then dropped to her knees, stunned. "Jackson, your horse." Only the saddle remained, tossed onto the sand, the reins shredded. They did not need to kill him. They only needed to make sure he could not escape. Boone had left a message as clear as a signature carved into the dark. "You will stay, and you will die." When the fire was finally out, they all went back inside. Everyone was exhausted, but no one could sleep. They gathered around the fireplace, the flames casting shadows across young faces marked with old wounds. "The Derringers, they never stop," Mirasu whispered, gripping the edge of her blanket. "Anyone who helps us becomes a target too." Jackson leaned against the wall, wiping soot from his hands. "I know, but tonight you saved me. At least, all of you did." 8 pairs of eyes turned toward him. A long silence settled in, not the silence of fear, but the silence of something new. A connection, thin as thread, but strong enough to begin tying them together. Aria spoke. We used to believe outsiders would never stand with us. She looked straight at Jackson, her gaze soft but sharp like forged steel. Maybe we were wrong. Jackson did not answer right away. He simply handed each of them a cup of warm water, one by one. Their hands, trembling from cold and fear, reached out and accepted it. As they sat in the glow of the fire, a rock suddenly hit the window, startling the whole house. Wrapped around the stone was a scrap of rough paper. On it, the message was scrawled. Tomorrow, we take the people. We take the land. Anyone who resists gets buried with them. Jackson read it, folded it, and tossed it into the fire. His eyes gleamed with a cold, frightening resolve. From now on, he said, no one here is alone. The 8 sisters looked at each other, then back at the man who had accidentally stepped into their war and chosen to stay. Out there, Boone's fire had gone out. But inside this small house, another fire had just begun to burn. Thank you so much for being here with me. Let me know where you are listening from. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel to support my work. I truly hope you stay safe and find happiness wherever you are hearing this from. The next morning arrived with a pale, washed out light, as if even the sun was afraid to shine too brightly on land so heavy with dark energy. Jackson had not slept, and neither had the 8 sisters. Through the night, they took turns standing watch, listening to every shift of the wind, trying to sense whether Boone would return. But at dawn, it was someone else who came. The sound of hooves rose from the distance, slow, steady, nothing like Boone's threatening rhythm. Jackson stepped out onto the porch, rifle still in hand. Behind him, the 8 girls readied their weapons, arrows and flint knives in tense hands. A middle-aged man approached on horseback. His hair was silver. His eyes carried the weight of a life that had seen too much, and a faded badge glinted beneath the desert dust. Marshal Rovan Pike. He raised both hands, voice gravelly from years of smoke, but calm. Put the gun down, Hale. I am not here to cause trouble. Jackson did not lower the rifle, but he did not raise it either. Who are you looking for? Not looking, Pike answered. Here to warn. He dismounted, opened a leather satchel, and pulled out a bundle of files tied with a thin rope. The papers were smoke-stained, the edges scorched as if they had narrowly escaped being erased from history altogether. He placed the bundle in Jackson's hands. The Derringers. I have been tracking them for over 8 years. Murder, bribing judges, land theft, wiping out every trace of their crimes against native tribes. Aria stepped forward, her gaze sharp as an Apache arrow. You knew, and you let them live? Pike let out a heavy sigh. Girl, the Derringers are not just rich. They have roots in the courts, in the banks, in the hands of every patrol commander. Every time I tried to bring them to trial, a witness disappeared. The evidence vanished. Or I received a coffin. Jackson opened the file. Inside were photos of burned out ranches, hastily buried bodies, maps marking water-rich lands that had been stolen. Each page felt like a knife stabbing into the past of this land. Pike looked Jackson in the eye. But this time is different. I have living witnesses, 8 of them. The sisters fell silent. Marshal Pike continued, his tone tightening. If you are willing to testify in federal court, the Derringers will fall. Not just Boone, the entire family behind him. Mirasu shook her head, fear written across her face. If we testify, the Derringers will kill us before we ever reach a courtroom. Pike nodded slowly. I will not lie to you. The Derringers know you are alive, and they will come here to finish the job to bury the last piece of evidence. Jackson clenched the folder tightly in his hands. Boone said he would return with the whole gang. What are you going to do about that? Marshal Pike turned to scan the ranch, the broken fences, the scorched barn, the clear prints of Derringer horses across the sand. Before I came here, he said, I sent a signal to the federal marshals. But they need time. Until then, he looked Jackson straight in the eye. We have to hold the line. We survive no matter what. Aria stood tall, her voice unwavering. If we testify, will the Derringers really be brought into the light? Pike answered with eyes heavy with truth. This is the last chance. For you. For this land. No one said anything after that. Outside, the sun had just crested over the mountains. But its light did not bring hope. It only revealed one thing. Tomorrow would burn, and whether they lived through it depended on what they chose today. After Marshall Pike left the wooden cabin, silence stretched thin like a wire about to snap. The 8 Apache sisters sat close together around the fireplace, its glow reflecting in their eyes that had seen too many loved ones fall. Jackson stood near the door, staring out at the land, where the sun had begun to tilt westward, signaling the return of night and danger. Arya was the first to break the silence. "Jackson, you do not owe us anything. If you leave now, maybe you still have a way out." Jackson turned to face her. "I know. Then why are you still here?" Lyra asked, her voice a mix of fear and frustration. "Boone and the Derringers, they will not let you go. They do not let anyone go." Jackson looked into their eyes that had witnessed more loss than anyone ever should. He spoke slowly, as if each word had been weighed and measured. "Because once I see what is right, I cannot turn away anymore." They looked at him not as a stranger anymore, but as the last man who had chosen to stand with them when the whole world had turned its back. Marshall Pike returned just after sunset, leading 2 mules loaded with supplies. He dropped a large burlap sack in the yard. Barbed wire, sandbags, oil lamps, wooden planks set up defenses. "They will come before dawn." Jackson asked, "You are certain?" "The Derringers do not sleep when their interests are threatened," Pike said, then looked at the 8 girls. "And they never pass up a chance to silence witnesses." No more words were needed. The group immediately got to work. Tala and Peha, the best with terrain, led Jackson and Pike around the ranch, pointing out weak spots: a blind corner behind the barn, a broken section of fence, windows that could be shattered from a distance. Lyra and Nima worked on snare traps, the kind used for hunting now turned into a deadly line of defense. Mirasu, Sowi, and Yara moved quickly through the fading light, gathering stones, dry branches, building barricades, patching holes in the walls. No one spoke of fear, though it clung to the air like a thin mist with every movement. Only tension and resolve. When darkness fully fell, they lit a single lamp inside the house. Jackson watched the sisters move precise, deliberate, hardened by pain but never broken. They did not tremble. They did not hesitate. And Jackson realized they had survived not by luck but because they were stronger than the world ever expected them to be. Marshall Pike walked over, placing a hand on Jackson's shoulder. "Hale, you could still walk away. I would not blame you." Jackson gripped his rifle tightly. "I am not leaving any girl behind. Not one." Pike gave a slight nod, the kind a man gives when he has seen too many choose the easy road, and knows when someone chooses the right one. When everything was ready, they sat down for a final few minutes of rest. Just a few. Because dawn was coming. Arya sat next to Jackson, her breath calm but steady. "If tomorrow we do not make it." "Do not say that," Jackson cut in. Still, Arya went on. "If we do not make it, just know, you did not only save our lives, you saved our people." Jackson looked at her. "Tomorrow," he said, "we live. All of us." Arya did not argue. She just smiled, the first smile he had seen from her since they met. Outside, the wind shifted. The night carried with it the signs of a storm approaching. And they knew Boone would not wait for morning to start the fight. The night had not yet fully lifted from the sky when Jackson's ranch sank into an eerie, unnatural silence. It was the kind of silence only a desert could produce, thick, heavy, and dangerous. Jackson and Marshall Pike took turns standing guard, while the 8 Apache sisters crouched in their carefully prepared tactical positions. Arya stood in the attic of the old barn, her eyes scanning the darkness like a hawk. "They are coming," she whispered. Jackson heard no horses, but he believed her. He had learned that Apache instincts were rarely wrong. Seconds later, the ground began to tremble. Not one horse, a whole gang. From the eastern shadows, a wave of dark figures emerged. Their horses moved slow but steady, forming a crescent that surrounded the ranch. Boone led them, his silhouette unmistakable even in the dark, the long black coat billowing behind him like a raven's wings. He shouted, "Jackson Hale, you have run out of road." Jackson stood tall, Winchester in hand. "I have no intention of running." Boone laughed, a sound that rang like steel on steel. "Then I will take your life." He raised his arm. The first shot rang out. A bullet struck the wooden plank next to Jackson, splinters flying. Immediately, Tala and Nima triggered a line of tripwire traps, flipping 2 gunmen off their horses. No screams, only the cold shock of overconfidence. Boone hissed, "Light up the house." But just as the gang raised their torches, Lyra, from the old watchtower, loosed 2 arrows, both hitting their marks, piercing the hands of the men trying to ignite the fire. The torches dropped into the sand and died out instantly. Marshal Pike responded with a short, precise burst of gunfire, forcing the Derringer gang to duck behind low brush. Boone did not rage. He smiled. "Well done, Hale." "Well, but not enough." He signaled again. Another group of thugs began circling behind the ranch toward the broken fence line hidden beneath sandbags. But Zoe and Peja had been lying in wait. As the first boot hit the ground, they yanked a rope tight, triggering a trap with a sharp snapping sound. Sand flew into the air, blinding the attackers. In that moment of chaos, Jackson charged, swinging the butt of his rifle to knock down the first man, while Pike covered his back with high-angled shots. Boone spurred his horse forward, drawing his gun, aiming straight at Jackson. "It is over, Hale." But before he could pull the trigger, Aria leapt from the roof, arrow drawn and aimed right at Boone. He dodged, but the arrow sank deep into his horse, which reared violently. Boone lost control and crashed to the ground. Jackson was already there, rifle loaded, standing over him. Their eyes locked. One held the frozen arrogance of a lifelong oppressor. The other, the steel resolve of a man who had chosen to stand firm. Boone growled, "You think saving those 8 girls changes anything?" Jackson's voice was calm, but unshakable. "It changes everything." Boone reached for a knife, but Aria was already beside Jackson. Her arrow aimed squarely at Boone's chest. At that moment, the thunder of hooves came from the west. Dozens of oil lanterns lit up the dark. Marshal Pike shouted, "Federal cavalry is here." The Derringer gang, seeing the reinforcements, dropped their weapons all at once. Boone was bound, rage burning in his eyes. The fight had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it would leave marks for a lifetime. No one died, but everything had changed. Jackson looked at the 8 sisters, then at the ruined ranch, the barn now just a frame, fences scorched and splintered. He spoke, breath still heavy from adrenaline. "Tomorrow, we rebuild everything." And no one disagreed, because they all knew tomorrow they were still the ones who survived. The morning after the battle, the first sunlight spilled over the ranch as if the sun had decided to give this place one more chance. The desert wind still carried the scent of ashes and burned wood, but beneath it, there was something else. The scent of a new beginning. Jackson stepped into the front yard, his boots crunching on sand mixed with cinders. The fence was broken. The barn, now just charred beams. The well had been torn up like it had survived the claws of some wild beast. Everything spoke of the night they had stood on the edge of life and death. But the 8 Apache sisters were still standing, all 8 of them. Marshal Pike too, no one missing. Aria stepped beside Jackson and handed him a small piece of wood. "We start here," she said. Jackson looked at the board, then at the eyes, waiting for his response. These were the same girls who had once been hung upside down like bait, now standing tall, not as victims, but as true owners of this land. He nodded. "All right. Let's begin." They divided the work. Peja and Tala began rebuilding the eastern fence. Lyra and Mirasu dug a temporary water trench, following memories of the underground stream their father had once protected. Nima, Yara, and Zoe gathered every usable scrap of wood and started framing a new corner of the barn. The air was full of a strange energy, part exhaustion, part hope, like they were cleaning up a life that had been scattered. Marshal Pike studied the burn marks on the ground. He let out a sigh. "The Derringers will be locked up for a long time. With your testimonies and my old case files, the feds will not let this go." Aria nodded. "Not with joy. Not with sadness. Just certainty. Justice may come late, but it comes." Pike smiled. "And thanks to all of you, this time, it came right on time." By noon, Jackson and the 8 sisters shared their first meal since it all began, just roasted corn, dry biscuits, and a few cactus fruits. But somehow, it felt warm. Nima, the youngest, held up a piece of the map. "Our father split the map into 8 parts so none of us could be forced to give it up. But now, do we even need it?" Aria looked at Jackson, then at the land around them. No, because the person who holds this land now is not the Derringers and not any other invader. She placed her piece of the map on the table. One by one, the others did the same. Jackson looked at the 8 pieces forming the shape of the ancient water route, the one their father died protecting. He spoke quietly. You can reclaim all of it. I will not hold on to anything. Aria shook her head. You do not understand. We did not come to take the land back from you. She stepped closer, her voice steady and low. We came to share this land with you. Jackson paused. Why? Aria smiled a rare smile, but one that warmed the western sky. Because you stayed when you could have walked away. Because you chose to protect the ones the world decided were not worth saving. And because you saved us from a fate no one else dared face. All 8 sisters nodded silent, but united. Jackson looked at them for a long moment. Then finally he said, Then from now on, we rebuild this home. Together. By late afternoon, they raised the first board of the new barn. Every nail, every strike of the hammer echoed like a promise that a place once torn by violence would become a home. The vast desert watched in silence. The wind no longer howled like grief. The sun no longer scorched like it wanted people gone. And in a place that once buried secrets and pain, they began to build a family. My friend, in the heart of a brutal desert, where evil had roamed free and shadows once covered every path, Jackson and the 8 Apache sisters made a choice that few ever dare to make. They stood for kindness, for what is right. They did not share blood, but they shared something deeper, the courage to see each other as human. And in that moment, when they stood side by side rebuilding the land everyone had forgotten, they proved that justice does not only come from bullets, it comes from hearts brave enough to love in the ruins. It has been an honor to share this story with you, dear listeners of Wild West storytelling. I truly hope you are safe and happy wherever you are listening from. I love you all. Let me know what you felt about this story. Leave a comment below. Type the number 8 if you enjoyed it. And do not forget to subscribe for more gripping tales from the Wild West.